So can we get the PowerPoint going here? Excellent. All right, good morning, good afternoon, I guess, everyone. It's good to be back here at Downsview Church. And I hope that sometime we could do lunch with the doctor downstairs again, where we actually eat food together. Today, I'm just going to do a very short talk with you about meal timing. As Seventh-day Adventists, we put a lot of emphasis on what to eat. We know that plant-based eating is the best way to go. However, there's not as much discussion about when to eat, because when we eat food is very important as well, and it could affect our health. Recently, I had a patient who he came into clinic, and he said that he had severe bloating and indigestion. And when I digged into his diet, he's told me that he's a complete vegan. And when I digged in even further, I realized he was a very healthy vegan. Lots of fruits, a lot of vegetables, beans, nuts, and that type of thing. He barely ate any processed food, no alcohol, none of that kind of stuff. However, he still struggled with a lot of bloating and indigestion. And when I digged in deeper, the real issue was not so much what he was eating, because he was eating the right food, but the way that his meal timing was completely off, and that was causing his problems. So we fixed that up, and when he came back, all the bloating was gone in a month. Okay, so I just want to share with you a little bit about what the science says about meal timing. Okay, so we know what we eat is important, we know how much we eat is important, but how about when we eat? Okay, does when we eat matter? Okay, and if you look at the science today, it's very abundantly clear that it does matter when we eat. Okay, what's typical? Okay, if you look on this graph here you see the circles there, and you see the dark circles. Okay, each of those circles represents a time when someone ate something. So you can see here that we as a society, we have a very long feeding window. Do you see that? We have a long feeding window. From 6 to 11 is our typical feeding window. Okay? Now, if you look at the graph on the left here, on this side, each of the rows represents an individual. And each of the red dots, you see the red dots up there, that represents when a person ate something. So you can see here, on average, first, you notice that people have very long feeding windows. Second, you notice that the average feeding, the amount of times that people eat, is about 4 or 5 or up to 7 times per day. Do you see that? Okay, each row represents, and you see the red represents when someone ate something. So you see, if you look here, people eat throughout the day, a very long feeding window, and many times throughout the day is the way that people do their food consumption. Okay, so you see that? Long feeding window, okay, and about 4 to 7 feeding events per day. Okay, if you look here, average feeding time 9 to 9. Okay, first meal is approximately 9 o'clock for many individuals. Their last meal is also around 9 o'clock. So again, long feeding window. Okay, and you see here on this graph here, each column represents one individual. Each of the dots represents when that person ate something. So you can see here, do people have set times for eating, yes or no, usually? No. Sometimes they do, but generally you could see here in this study, people just kind of eat randomly throughout the day. You see that? There's no clean breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It's just it fluctuates throughout any given day, okay? Now, you don't need researchers to tell you this. We know exactly what goes on with many people. They wake up, and they go to work, they rush out the door, and they grab some donuts and some coffee on the way out. Okay? Then, at 10 o'clock at the office, they go grab something to eat, and then it's lunchtime, you grab your lunch around 1 maybe. Then before you leave the office, you're going to grab some snacks on the way out. And then you have dinner, and then before you go to bed, some people watch TV, and they grab some snacks to eat. This is the way many Canadians go about their daily business. Okay, so you see a long feeding window, all right? Also, what's typical is that the earlier meals are very small and they get progressively larger as the day goes on, correct? For many people, okay? So breakfast is usually very small for most people, and then lunch gets a little bit bigger, and then their largest meal is dinner, okay? Also, what happens is that their largest meals are usually at night when the sun goes down, and they eat lighter during the daytime. Are we together? Okay, a lot of people do this, correct? Okay. What we're gonna see today is that this is the complete opposite from what we should be doing, okay? What I'm gonna argue for today is that we should be eating most of our calories when it's daytime. We should be eating very minimal calories when it hits nighttime. Earlier meals should be larger, and the meal should get progressively smaller as the days go on. Also, our feeding window should be much shorter. Okay, this is what I'm going to talk about today. Okay, and now, we're in a Seventh-day Adventist church. Ellen White, she's a Seventh-day Adventist, and who wrote extensively about health. And this is what she says here: "It is the custom and order of society to take a slight breakfast or a small breakfast, but this is not the best way to treat the stomach. At breakfast time, the stomach is in a better condition to take care of more food than at the second or third meal of the day. The habit of eating sparingly, sparing breakfast and a larger dinner is wrong. Make your breakfast correspond more nearly to the heartiest meal of the day." Okay? So basically what she's saying is that it's better to have a larger breakfast and then make dinner lighter. Okay? And we're going to see that this is actually the way, this is really the way that way to promote good digestion. Okay? I see the digestive system as kind of like solar panels. Okay? Solar panels work well throughout the day, but they work the best at a certain time of the day, correct? When the sun is out and it's the brightest. Are we together? Right? Okay. So it's the same with your gut. Your gut can work throughout the day, but it works the best at certain times of the day. And we have to time our meals to correspond to those times. And what we're going to see in the science is that science is definitely showing that the gut is best programmed for food consumption earlier in the day and not later in the day. Okay? So it all goes down to this thing called the circadian rhythm. All right? Yeah. So you see there the circadian rhythm. So you see the red circle there is something called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. We'll just call it the SCN. The SCN is basically the place where it coordinates your daily rhythm. Everything in your body works on a rhythm. All right? And when we go against this rhythm, we are setting ourselves up for health and sickness. All right? Now you notice here, what input, or where does the SCN get its input from? Do you see? Where does it get its input from, its information from? The eyes. You guys see that in the picture? The eyes. Now, what information comes to the eyes? Light and dark. Are we correct? Yes? So you see, the human, God designed us to function on a certain rhythm based on daylight and nighttime, okay, including our digestive tract. All right, so you see here in this picture, okay, sorry, didn't turn out so good, but that's the brain. And you see the circadian rhythm. When the light and dark come, the input goes to our eyes. It goes to the SCN, and that coordinates the rhythm for the rest of the body, including mood, appetite, hormones, temperature regulation, feeding and fasting, blood pressure, and everything else. When we go against this rhythm, then we are setting ourselves up for sickness. All right? Now you see in this picture here, I want you to notice up there, insulin. You see insulin, it's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's about nine words down. Insulin, you see, insulin spikes in the morning, early in the morning. Okay, now, what does insulin do? Does anyone know? What does insulin do? It allows sugar into the muscles and the cells. So when is the best time to put carbohydrates into the body? In the morning. You guys see that? Okay? It's in the morning, all right? And you see all the different hormones there and all the different systems, they spike, they operate, they kind of spike at certain times of the day, and then other times of the day, it goes down. This tells us something, that we have to work with this rhythm. Okay, we have to work with this rhythm, okay? Our bodies do some things better when it's dark and other things better when the sun is out. This is innate, and when we chronically attempt to counteract this, dysfunction ensues, okay? So what is the best time to eat? Okay? Many people, they eat dinner around 7:30, okay? Then they go watch TV, and then they go to bed at about, let's say 11 o'clock. Okay? This is not good. Okay? When we artificially prolong the daylight, because we have electricity and stuff, it actually can offset digestion. Okay? So you see here, the suppression of the nocturnal rise in melatonin under the influence of evening and nighttime bright light exposure is accompanied nocturnally by an attenuated decline in core temperature and reduced increment of lower extremity skin temperature elevation, presumably because of concomitant enhanced activity of sympathetic nervous system and a probable reduction of activity of the parasympathetic nervous system. Okay, so what is this talking about here? When we prolong the daylight phase by turning on the lights at night, what happens is that you get enhanced this thing called sympathetic and you reduce parasympathetic. Okay, what does that mean? Sympathetic is fight or flight. Okay? So for example, let's see. It's what happens when you, for example, have to run away from an animal. That's sympathetic. Okay? Or you get into an argument with your boss. That's sympathetic. Like fight or flight. You fight or you run away. Okay? Now, parasympathetic is rest and digest. It's kind of like the system that kicks in when you're resting. All right? Now, I want to ask you a question. When you're running away from an animal or when you're in a fight, is your body going to prioritize digestion, yes or no? No. What is it going to prioritize? The muscles and the brain, right? Because you don't really, if you're fighting a bear, you don't really care about digestion. Okay? Same with if you're fighting your boss. I hope you don't fight your boss, but let's just say you do. Okay? You're not caring about digestion. Okay? So what your body does, it puts its resources not to the gut, but to other parts of the body. Okay? So if you spike sympathetic, it's not good for digestion. Okay? Keep that in mind. Now, when you're in parasympathetic, you can prioritize digestion, correct? When you're resting, all right? What happens is that when we prolong the light phase at nighttime, it enhances sympathetic. So is that good for digestion, yes or no? No. Okay? So when we eat late at night, and then we should be going to bed because it's dark, right? But because of technology, when we keep the lights on and we prolong the light phase, what it does, it actually spikes sympathetic, and then we don't get good digestion, okay? Suppression of the cholinergic tone of parasympathetic nervous system under the influence of evening bright light exposure could decrease the excretion of digestive juices and activity of gastrointestinal muscles. This is not beneficial for the digestion and absorption of the evening meal. Are we together? Okay. Now, what you might be thinking is that, okay, if that is bad, then why don't we just eat late, but then go to sleep right afterwards? Okay? Would that solve the problem? And it doesn't. Okay? The mammalian circadian clock drives the temporal coordination in cellular homeostasis, and it leads the day day-night fluctuation in physiological functions. Okay. The digestive, absorptive, and metabolic capacities of nutrients also show day-night variations in several peripheral tissues, such as small intestine and liver. It is therefore indicated that the bioavailability or metabolic capacity of nutrients depends on the time of day. So what is it saying here? The circadian rhythm that we talked about, it works on a rhythm. Okay? The digestive and absorptive capabilities, okay, do not increase at night, it actually decreases at night. Okay, this is what it's saying. Humans exhibit a daily rhythm in the production of saliva, gastric acids, digestive enzymes, and bile salts, the production of all of which declines late at night. Are we together? Okay, so the stuff, the juices that we need to digest food, does it go up or down at night? It goes down. So when's the best time to eat? It's not at night. It's earlier in the day. All right? Does that make sense? So if we eat dinner at 7:30, then go to bed soon afterwards, this is not good. Do you ever eat late and then you wake up and it feels like it's still there? Okay, so you know exactly now what's going on. Okay? Okay, you see here, do you know how long it takes for a standard meal to empty the stomach? How many hours? 5 to 6. 5 to 6. Okay, so let's do a little bit of math. Okay, and let's say you eat dinner at 7:30. Okay, what time is it going to empty out of the stomach? Around 12:30. Correct? Okay, 5 or 6 hours. Okay, but 12:30 is late at night. Would you agree? So at that time, the digestive juices have gone down. The digestive processes are slowing down. So you see here, the habit that many people have where they eat dinner, 7 o'clock, 7:30, this is not good. Because by the time that it empties the stomach and goes into the small intestine, the digestive processes are slowing down at that time. Okay, this is why often when people eat late, they wake up and they feel like the food has not digested, and therefore they don't feel like eating breakfast. Are we together? Okay, you wake up, you eat late, then you wake up the next day and you don't feel like eating breakfast, and the cycle continues. Okay, which is not good. This is also another reason why it's not good to snack between meals. Okay, so again, how many hours does it take for food to empty the stomach? 5 to 6 hours. Okay, now I want you to think of something. You're going to do your laundry. Okay, let's say you're doing your laundry, and let's say you're going to dry some stuff. Okay, you put one load in, and how long is a typical cycle to dry clothing? An hour. Okay, let's just say an hour. Okay, now is anyone here going to stop halfway through and then put more wet clothes in? Is anyone going to do that? No, that's foolishness. Correct? Right. You're going to finish the hour, get that clothing out, and then you're going to put the next load in. Correct? Okay. The stomach is the exact same thing. Okay. It takes about 5 or 6 hours. But what many people are doing is they're stopping the cycle halfway through, and they're putting more food in. Now you got a digested food mixing in with now fresh food that just come in. Are we together? And this is going to mess up digestion. Okay? Now, what also happens at night is that, your digestive tract, the intestines, it needs to contract to move food along. Are we together? Okay, it needs to contract so that it moves food along. At nighttime, it's called peristalsis. That process actually slows down at night. So again, you eat late and then you wake up and you feel like your food is still in your stomach. Now you know, okay, because the process of moving the food along, that process also slows down at night. Are we together? Okay. Glucose tolerance is higher in the morning than in the evening. Okay, glucose tolerance is higher in the morning than in the evening. So what I think that we should be doing is that we should be eating most of our food during the daytime, and as night sets in, we should be eating as little food as possible. Are we together? Okay, does that kind of make sense? I hope it does. And then go to bed early. Okay, now, some of you might be saying, well, if I do that, I'm going to be super, super hungry. Okay, if I stop eating at like 3 o'clock and I don't eat anything else afterwards, I'm going to be super hungry, all right? But you know, that's actually not true, okay, or not necessarily true. Okay, I want you to notice something here. Okay, you can't see the colors too well, but you see the red blocks. Okay, that represents people who finished eating earlier. Okay, and then the red represents people who are eating later. You notice here, hunger levels at night is actually lower amongst people who finish their meals earlier. Sleep satisfaction is higher amongst people who finish their last meal earlier. Okay? I want to show you another study here. In this study, they did something really fascinating. They got two groups of people. One group ate from 8 o'clock to 8 p.m. Okay, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. The other group, they did something really interesting with this group. They got them to eat at 8 a.m. and they finished eating at 2 p.m. Is that early? That's kind of early, right? For most people, 2 p.m. Okay, and they looked at what happened. Okay, check this out. So you see here some graphs. Okay, let's see. Okay, now I want you to notice something. Look at the desire to eat. Okay, now the white graph represents people who had a long feeding window, 8 to 8. The dark graph, the gray graph, represents people who finished eating at 2 p.m. So look at number A, or look at letter A. Look at the evening time. The desire to eat. Who had a higher desire to eat in the evening? Was it those who finished eating early or finished eating late? Late. Isn't that interesting? You would think that those who finished eating at 2 p.m. would have a higher desire to eat at nighttime, correct? Because they haven't eaten in a long while. But it's actually lower amongst that group. And you go through, hunger levels are actually similar amongst those who are eating late versus those who finished eating early. Now, you see fullness. You look at letter D. Fullness, is it higher amongst people who ate late or people who finished eating early? Look at letter D, fullness, by evening time. Fullness is higher amongst people who actually finished eating earlier. Isn't that interesting? So the people who finished eating around 2 p.m., their sense of fullness in the stomach was actually higher even though they fasted longer. Isn't that interesting? Okay, that's fascinating, all right? So look what they say here. Thus, despite the longer daily fasting duration for the early time restricted feeding group, early time restricted feeding, so those are people who finish eating at 2 o'clock, does not increase hunger, at least not when food intake is calorie matched. Okay? On the contrary, early time restricted feeding decreased the desire and capacity to eat and increased feelings of fullness in the evening. Early time restricted feeding may therefore help curb food intake in the evening and in turn facilitate weight loss. This is consistent with rodent studies, so they've done studies in mice and rats, which have reported that both early time restricted feeding and other forms of time restricted feeding reduce appetite hormones and body weight. Okay, and this is just another study showing the same thing. Early time restricted feeding also tended to decrease the mean desire to eat and increase fullness across the waking day. All right? Surprisingly and paradoxically, early time restricted feeding reduced swings in hunger, making hunger levels more even-keeled throughout the day, which may reduce overeating or binge eating. So what scientists are finding is that despite finishing their last meal earlier, they don't get these massive swings in hunger like you would expect. Their hunger levels are actually much more well controlled than people who eat later. Are we together? Very, very fascinating, all right? Now, there's another benefit to eating, to shortening the feeding window. One of them is weight loss. Okay, in this study here, what they found was that they got people and they shortened the feeding window and they actually lost weight, and they were actually able to maintain the weight loss even a year later. Okay, and so they dropped 7 pounds in 4 months, then maintained that weight loss in 1 year. Okay, despite no change in diet. They didn't change the diet, all they did was just switch when they're eating. Okay, and this is a study showing the same thing. Okay. Okay. Now, other benefits to eating earlier and having a fasting window. Okay, there's this thing called autophagy. Okay, autophagy. Okay, has anyone here heard of autophagy? No? Okay, let me explain. Let's say in your house, you have a broken window. Okay, what are you going to do with that window? You're going to fix the window, correct? You're going to fix that window, okay? Let's say you have garbage building up in your home. What are you going to do with that garbage? You're going to throw it out, okay? Your body does exactly the same thing. Throughout the day, throughout the week, stuff in your body is going to break down. You can say garbage accumulates in your cells. Your body has a system to clean that stuff up and to fix stuff in your body. That is called autophagy. Are we together? So you think autophagy fixes things and cleans up things. Okay? So for example, let's just say you got this mitochondria, and it's an old mitochondria, let's say. So what your body's going to do is going to swallow up that mitochondria and then destroy it. Are we together? Okay, it's going to go swallow it up and destroy that old mitochondria and then replace it with a new one. All right? So the thing is this. To set off autophagy, okay, one of the things that starts autophagy is actually fasting. Are we together? So when you're sick, sometimes you hear people say like you should fast, right? That's true, because when you're fasting, your body sets off this process called autophagy, which is your body's way of healing and fixing things. Okay, but to set that off, one of the best ways is actually to fast. If we're constantly feeding throughout the day, it limits the ability to set off autophagy. Okay, look here. It says, when organisms ingest regular meals, their cells receive a relatively steady supply of nutrients and so remain in a growth mode, okay, in which protein synthesis is robust and autophagy is what? Suppressed. So when you're constantly feeding your cells nutrients, it increases growth, decreases autophagy. Okay? Accordingly, fasting inhibits the mTOR path. That's mTOR just is a growth pathway. It stands for mechanistic target of rapamycin. It's just a growth pathway. And stimulates autophagy. So what stimulates autophagy? Fasting. Okay? In cells of many tissues, including the liver, kidney, and skeletal muscle. In this way, fasting cleanses cells of damaged molecules and organelles. Okay? So very clearly what we see here is that when you have a long fasting window, that actually starts setting off autophagy. Okay? Okay. All right. So basically what I want to submit to you is that the best way to go about eating is really to eat, to have a shorter feeding window, to eat most of your calories earlier in the day, not later, and to go to bed as early as possible. All right? There are many myths and presumptions concerning diet and health, including that it is important to eat 3 or more meals per day on a regular basis. Okay. I see the hand. We'll get to the questions after, yes. All right? So there are many myths. That you have to eat 3 meals a day, you have to snack throughout the day, all this kind of stuff. This is a myth. All right, it's not necessary for everyone. We have to realize that this is a new phenomenon. The ability to eat at night is very new in human history. Okay? This picture here, these are Koreans way back in the day, and they're eating this meal. I'm not sure what they're eating there, but I assure you that meal is probably taking place during the daytime. Okay? My mom, she used to have a property up in Kawartha Lakes. You guys know Kawartha Lakes? Up there north in the boonies. And sometimes the electricity would go off. We have no electricity. It was really remote. Okay, it was very, very remote. When that happened, what were we doing at nighttime? Do you think we were cooking food at night? I assure you, it sucks to cook food with candlelight. Okay, when the light would turn off, we had to turn on candles, literally. We had to actually use candles. And so basically when nighttime hit, we just went to bed. We just went to bed. And this is what our ancestors did. Okay? They ate during the day and they slept at night because it's just too uncomfortable it's really a hassle to cook at nighttime. Okay? So I'm sure some of them they ate at night, but it wasn't a regular practice. Likely they were sleeping at night because it's just the thing to do. It's just too much of a hassle to really do anything at nighttime with candles. All right? This ability to eat at nighttime is very new because of electricity. All right? It's very new, but I think many people are struggling or suffering because of it. Indeed, animals in the wild and hunter-gatherer humans rarely, if ever, suffer from obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease. Okay? Animals in the wild. I'm not talking about your pet dog. Because you see these pet dogs now, they get sick, right? We used to own a cat and he got obese. Okay? Because we were feeding him too good. We were feeding him too well. Okay? But animals in the wild, they never get heart disease and these other obesity and stuff like that. Even though they could. Is because they stay with their rhythm. Are we together? Animals stick with their rhythm. Okay? And same with humans. We're not animals. Humans are not animals, obviously. But, just like animals, we do have a rhythm. And when we stick with the rhythm, it's going to promote health. All right? Just finish off here with this Ellen White quote. It is quite a common custom with the people of the world to eat 3 times a day. Besides eating at irregular intervals between meals, so like snacking, and the last meal is generally the most hearty and is often taken just before retiring. So what she's saying, most people, they eat just throughout the day, irregular times, and the largest meal is usually is dinner meal, and they usually eat it right before or soon before bedtime. What she says here, this is reversing the natural order. A hearty meal should never be taken so late in the day. Should these persons change their practice and eat but 2 meals a day and nothing between meals, not even an apple, a nut, or any kind of fruit, the result would be seen in good appetite and greatly improved health. All right? So what I submit to you today is very simple. Is to have a consistent breakfast, whenever that is. It's going to change for different people, obviously. Okay? Then have your second meal no earlier than 5 or 6 hours after your first meal. Okay? Or you can go even longer if you want. Okay? And not to snack between meals. Are we together? Not to snack between meals, and also to try to eat your meal during the daytime, not at night. Now, of course, we live in Canada, so sometimes, in the height of winter, nighttime comes in early, right? Like sometimes it hits nighttime at like 4:30. So obviously, there are certain times of the year where it's going to be hard to exactly stick with, exactly be perfect. We understand that, right? But generally, the principle is 2 meals a day is usually better than 3. Snacking is usually it's really not good, okay? And having a consistent breakfast and making it the most hearty meal of the day is really the best practice for digestion. We together? Okay. So this is what we did. That patient I told you about? This is what we did. He was a vegan, so he was eating all the right foods. No processed food. He was eating really like the right foods, okay? However, he was not eating the right way. he was snacking multiple times throughout the day and eating, I think it was quite late at night. So what we told him to do is we say, hey, look, you're vegan, that's great. You're eating really healthy, that's good, but you're not eating the right way. We told him to eat 2 meals a day, no snacking, and to cut out the evening meal. I told him he was very active, he was like very into exercise. So I said, if you have to have a third meal, make it very light, or maybe have like a smoothie, which is easier to digest than an actual meal, right? Smoothie. So he said, try that. He comes back a month later, and pretty much it was all gone, completely gone, just by switching the way that you eat. All right. So this is what I recommend to everyone here. And yeah, any questions? Yes, ma'am. Right. 12 to 6, right. Right, so that's a really good question. So she, our sister there does intermittent fasting. She does, we talked about, shorter feeding windows, so she does 12 to 6, which is 6 hours, which is really good, right? So she's saying, is that better, or is that comparable to eating like earlier in the day? Maybe like a 8 to 2 or 8 to 3. I think 12 to 6 is okay. I do think, though, that it is still better to eat earlier. Because, again, the circadian rhythm. So 12 o'clock is not bad, but, it is really better to eat a little bit earlier. And there are good studies showing the 12 to 6 is okay, but there's also good studies showing early time-restricted feeding, which is, a little bit earlier than 12, right? So I know that people have, like, different work schedules and all that kind of stuff, right? So I get that. So if 12 to 6 is really what you have to do, and that's working for you, I think that's better than what most people are doing anyways. But if people can do it, I think earlier is definitely a little bit better. That's what I think, yeah. And of course, I think another question is like, how about kids, right? If you have like growing kids and stuff. So I think that's a good thing. That's a good point. So, kids sometimes, they want a third meal and all that kind of stuff. So that's fine, But, definitely I still think that the principle stands that like, if you have children who are growing, you could, give them 3 meals a day, that's fine. But still, try to eat a little bit earlier in the day. Not make the last meal the largest meal, and try not to snack so much between meals. So even I think with kids, you can generally still practice what we're discussing. Okay. Any other comments? Yes. Great question. So the question was about diabetes. Okay. So we do exactly the same with people with diabetes. Well, and what we tell them to do is that usually for people with diabetes, they monitor their blood sugar, right? So when people have diabetes, they have to really monitor their blood sugar because we don't want it to drop too low. But we've helped many people with diabetes where we still tell them to eat 2 meals a day, eat plant-based, right? And talk to their doctor about maybe adjusting their medications because they're on this new eating plan, right? Because we want to make sure that they don't drop too low. Yeah, but just because someone has diabetes does not mean that they have to eat 3 meals a day with snacks between meals. That's absolutely not a mandatory practice for people with diabetes, contrary to what you might hear from people. Okay, what they tell people with diabetes, you have to eat every 3 hours. Okay, that's because they have them on high levels of medications, which requires them to eat so they don't drop their sugars too low. Okay. But if their doctor is willing to make an adjustment in their insulin levels and so forth, then they can actually practice 2 meals a day, and that actually will help them lose weight, which many people with diabetes struggle with, which is then going to help reverse their disease. So indeed, people with diabetes can still practice what we discussed today, and we've helped many people do that. So, yeah. Any other comments, questions? Yes?
But I think I might have it the wrong way, because some days my window of eating might be 6 hours, and then I notice I might go from 8 o'clock, sometime I go 8 o'clock to 11 a.m., 8 o'clock to 12 noon, then to 1 to 2 to 3 o'clock, based on what I'm doing during the day. Like say if my lunch this week is at 11:15, then I'm gonna go 8, maybe 7 o'clock until 11 a.m. in the morning.
Right.
Or next week it changes to 12:15, so I go to 12:15. So now I'm thinking, and especially on a Sunday, I might be busy on a Sunday, so might be my first meal is at 3 p.m. in the afternoon. So
Right.
I guess that's not really good for the body, because now I'm having it going.
Right. So
18 hours, 20 hours. And
Right. Yeah, you do want to have set times for eating generally. Of course, there's going to be times that, if you're invited to a wedding and the wedding reception's at 7 o'clock, whatever, like, we're not talking about exceptions, amen? Okay, we're not talking about exceptions, okay? We're talking about the general practice. And the general practice is best to have generally the set times for eating. That is really the best. So it's not good to kind of have all this like sporadic eating times. That's not really the best. Yeah. Final comments, questions? Okay, so I hope you learned something. Hope you found this informative, and hope you practice it. I think that you'll find that it is really quite beneficial for you. All right, so thank you everyone for that, for paying attention.